the quiet and green village of Kuyani lived a sweet young girl named Sena. She was the kind of girl who greeted everyone with a warm smile, helped elders carry their firewood, and never said a harsh word to anyone. Life had not been easy for Sena, but she never complained. Her heart was full of love, and her hands were always busy with honest work. People in the village admired her gentle spirit and quiet strength. Sena lived with her mother, Ruwa, a woman who once knew joy, but had become cold and distant after losing her husband, Sena's real father. He had died mysteriously a few years ago, leaving a deep emptiness in their home. Life after his death was never the same. Ruwa struggled to raise Sena alone, and soon she made a decision that changed everything. She remarried. The man she chose was Gondo, a stranger who had come from another village. At first, he seemed like a gift from the gods. He spoke gently in public, wore fine clothes, and always acted like a man of wisdom and honor. The villagers thought Ruwa was lucky to have found such a respectable man. But behind that charming mask was a man full of pride, cruelty, and darkness. From the moment Gondo entered their home, things began to change. He would sit like a king while Sena ran around doing all the chores. He never lifted a finger to help, but he always found reasons to shout and scold. In front of others, he pretended to care for Sena, calling her my daughter. But when the door closed, his true face appeared. He was a tyrant, harsh, impatient, and violent. Sena, still just a teenager, became his punching bag. For the smallest reasons, he would remove his belt and strike her, leaving bruises on her back and scars on her soul. If she dropped a plate, he would beat her. If she spoke too softly, he would accuse her of being lazy and punish her. Her cries echoed in the corners of the house, but her mother stayed silent. Ruwa, blinded by her desire to keep her marriage, turned away from her daughter's pain. She told herself it was just discipline. She told herself Sena would be fine. Gondo's cruelty didn't end with beatings. He made Sena cook, clean, wash clothes, fetch water, and even polish his shoes. He treated her like a servant, not like a daughter. And as if that wasn't enough, he brought his own daughter from a past marriage, a rude and arrogant girl named Zuba. Zuba was a mirror image of her father, always mocking Sena, calling her names, and making her work twice as hard. Gondo encouraged it. He smiled as Zuba insulted Sena, and sometimes even joined in, but Sena endured it all with silent tears and a strong spirit. She didn't fight back. She didn't scream. She just kept hoping that one day life would change. She would wake up early, sweep the compound, and pray silently in her heart, one day, this pain will end. And yet, no one in the village truly knew what was happening behind the walls of Ruwa's house. They still believed Gondo was a good man. After all, he greeted everyone politely, donated food during village events, and spoke with charm during community meetings. No one could imagine the monster he became when no one was watching. But life has a strange way of listening to the cries of the innocent. It never forgets injustice. And though Gondo thought he was powerful, he didn't know that destiny was already watching him, waiting for the perfect time to strike back. Sena often sat by the big mango tree outside their house, remembering her father's warm smile and gentle hands. He was the only one who ever called her my little sunshine. But now, those memories felt like distant dreams. Her father had died suddenly and mysteriously, and no one ever truly explained what happened. One day, he was there, full of life, and the next, he was gone, buried in silence. Sena was just a child back then, but even now, years later, her heart still ached for him. If he were alive, none of this pain would have happened. He would have never allowed a monster like Gondo to walk into their lives. From the moment Gondo entered their home, everything changed. He didn't come as a father, he came as a ruler. At first, it was little things. He would scold Sena for leaving the broom in the wrong place, or for speaking too softly. But soon, his anger turned into something much darker. He began hitting her with his belt, sometimes for reasons that made no sense at all. If she didn't put enough salt in the soup, she was whipped. If she looked tired, she was punished. If she stayed quiet, he called her stubborn and slapped her. No matter what she did, it was never right in his eyes. Behind closed doors, Gondo was a beast. His voice would roar through the house, followed by the sharp sound of a belt slashing against skin. Sena's body carried marks like maps of her suffering, bruises on her back, scars on her arms, and pain hidden deep in her heart. She would cry silently in her small room, burying her face in her pillow so the neighbors wouldn't hear. But no one came. No one ever came. Her mother, Rua, saw it all. She saw the marks. She heard the screams, but she chose silence. Rua had become a woman desperate to keep her marriage at any cost. She told herself that Gondo was just disciplining her daughter. She told herself that it wasn't abuse. It was just a man trying to raise a child right. But deep down, she knew the truth. She saw the fear in Sena's eyes, but she turned her face away. She watched her daughter suffer, just to protect her place beside a cruel man. There were nights when Sena would beg her mother with tear-filled eyes, "Mama, please tell him to stop." But Rua would look away, sometimes even scolding her, saying, "You must learn to respect your father." But Gondo was no father. He was a heartless tyrant, and his rage only grew stronger with time. Sena became a prisoner in her own home. She was not allowed to rest, not allowed to smile, not allowed to live like a child. Gondo made her life a nightmare, and Rua allowed it. The home that was once filled with laughter now echoed with fear. The walls that once held love now carried only pain. Even when Sena fell sick, Gondo showed no mercy. He would still shout at her, still force her to cook, clean, and fetch water. Zuba, Gondo's daughter, enjoyed watching it all, mocking Sena, calling her weak and useless. And Gondo encouraged it, letting his daughter turn the knife even deeper into Sena's wounds. But what no one knew was that behind Sena's quiet eyes, a storm was building. Her spirit had not broken. It was only waiting for the day when the tables would turn. Because life always balances the scales. And while Gondo was busy tearing her down, life was silently preparing a lesson for him. A lesson harder than any belt he had ever used. Sena's life slowly turned into a silent prison. Day by day, her smile faded, and her eyes became empty. The once cheerful girl who used to hum while sweeping the compound now walked quietly with her head down, afraid to even breathe too loud. Every corner of the house reminded her of pain. Her back carried fresh scars from the belt, and her heart carried wounds that no one could see. At night, when everyone slept, she would cry softly into her pillow, soaking it with tears, afraid someone might hear her and punish her more. She was no longer treated like a daughter in her own home. Gondo had turned her into a full-time maid. From sunrise to sunset, she worked like a slave, washing clothes, scrubbing floors, cooking meals, cleaning dishes, and running errands. If she rested for even a moment, Gondo would shout and raise his belt again. And Rua, she watched it all with cold eyes, pretending not to see the bruises, pretending not to hear the cries of her own child. To her, keeping Gondo happy was more important than protecting her daughter. But the worst part was Zuba, Gondo's daughter from his previous marriage. Zuba had arrived with an arrogant attitude, walking around like she owned the house. She never lifted a finger to help, yet she acted like royalty. She mocked Sena at every chance, calling her the house rat and laughing when Gondo punished her. "You're nothing but a servant here," she would say, tossing her shoes for Sena to pick up. She spilled water on purpose, just to watch Sena clean it. She tore clothes and blamed Sena, knowing her father would believe her lies without question. Zuba's bullying didn't stop at words. She would push Sena around, throw things at her, and even lock her out of the house during heavy rain. And Gondo, he never stopped her. In fact, he smiled with pride, pleased that his daughter was acting strong. He treated Zuba like a precious jewel, while treating Sena like dirt under his shoes. The difference in how they were treated was like day and night. Sena's world kept shrinking. She had no one to talk to, no one to protect her. The other villagers didn't know what was going on behind the walls of their home. Outside, Gondo and Zuba acted polite, while inside, they were monsters. And Rua, her own mother, had become a stranger, silent, distant, and cold. Sometimes Sena would stare at the stars, whispering to the night sky, "Why me? What did I do wrong?" But there was no answer, only silence and pain. Her young heart carried too much sorrow, and every day felt heavier than the last. But still, she endured. Still, she held on. Even though her back was covered in scars, her spirit refused to die. What Gondo and Zuba didn't know was that life has a strange way of watching. It may be quiet for a while, but it never forgets. The tears that fell on Sena's pillow were not wasted. The bruises on her back were not ignored. Destiny was silently taking notes. And when the time came, the pain they gave her would return to them 10 times harder. Because karma always finds those who think they can hurt others and walk free. And for Gondo and Zuba, that time was slowly but surely coming. One quiet afternoon, Sena carried a heavy basket of clothes on her head as she made her way to the river. It was her only moment of peace in the day, away from the harsh voice of Gondo and the cruel laughter of Zuba. The river, with its gentle flow and soft breeze, felt like a friend that listened to her silent cries. As she began scrubbing clothes on the smooth rocks, she noticed something unusual by the edge of the bushes. A man lying on the ground, barely conscious. His clothes were torn, his arm was bleeding, and his face was tired, as if he had walked for days without rest. Most people would have run away in fear, but not Sena. Despite her own pain and broken spirit, her heart still beat with kindness. She rushed to the stranger, dropped her basket, and tore a piece of her wrapper to wrap his wound. She brought him water from the river, wiped his face, and stayed by his side until he could sit up. The man's name was Tibari, though he didn't reveal much about himself. He simply said he had been attacked by thieves on his journey and lost his way. Sena helped him clean his wound properly and even offered him the little food she had carried with her. She had nothing to give, but she gave him everything she could, her time, her care, and her warmth. It was something Tibari hadn't felt in a long time. As the sun began to set, Tibari sat under a tree, watching this poor village girl, who had so little but gave so much. There was something about Sena that touched his soul, her gentleness, her strength beneath the pain, the quiet sadness in her eyes, and yet the kindness that still flowed from her heart. He had met many people in his life, but none like her. Before he left, Tibari looked deeply into her eyes and said softly, "You don't know me, but one day I will return this kindness. Life will not always be this cruel to you, I promise." Sena smiled faintly and nodded, thinking he was just being polite. After all, what could a wounded stranger do for a girl like her? She never asked who he really was, and he didn't tell. She simply helped him, because it was the right thing to do. She watched him walk away slowly, never knowing that she had just changed the course of her life with one small act of kindness. That day at the river, something shifted. For the first time in a long while, Sena felt a spark of hope. She didn't know what the future held, but she felt in her heart that her life wasn't meant to end in pain. Somewhere deep inside, she began to believe that maybe, just maybe, better days were coming. What she didn't know was that the stranger she helped was not just an ordinary man. Tibari was a wealthy noble, traveling in disguise to learn more about the lives of common people, and he would never forget the girl with scars on her back and gold in her heart. Destiny had quietly stepped into her life, and though Sena didn't see it yet, her story was about to take a new turn. The girl who cried alone at night had just planted the seed of her own miracle. Gondo's wickedness didn't stop at home. It grew larger, reaching every corner of the village of Kuyani. With his fake smiles and sweet-talking tongue, he fooled everyone in the village council. He pretended to be a man of wisdom, a man of justice, someone who cared for the people. But behind that mask, he was a greedy wolf, always plotting, always hungry for more power. The villagers, unaware of his true nature, trusted him. They listened to his words and gave him more responsibilities, thinking he would bring good changes. But instead, Gondo brought destruction wrapped in lies. Soon, he became one of the most powerful voices in the council. He sat at the head of meetings, made decisions for the people, and acted like a great leader. But in secret, he was stealing from the very people who trusted him. The community chest, which held money for the poor, for repairs, for school fees and village projects, Gondo quietly began emptying it. He used the funds to build a bigger house, buy expensive clothes, and feed his growing pride. No one dared to question him, because he always had an excuse, always had a plan to cover up his dirty tracks. But Gondo didn't stop there. His greed grew even bigger. He started selling village lands to outsiders without permission. Farmlands that once belonged to the people were now being bought by strangers. Elders and poor families were being pushed off their lands without warning. And when anyone tried to speak up, Gondo silenced them with threats or lies. He spread rumors to destroy their names or accused them of crimes they didn't commit. One by one, the voices of the innocent were shut down, and Gondo continued to rise like a dark cloud over Kuyani. He began walking with his head high in the village square, as if he owned the entire land. He threw parties, gave fake speeches about development, and handed out little gifts just to blind the villagers from the truth. His daughter Zuba also enjoyed the power and pride. She mocked the villagers, looked down on everyone, and boasted about how rich her father was. Together, Gondo and Zuba laughed behind closed doors, while the rest of the village suffered in silence. But what Gondo didn't know was that lies don't last forever. Greed may rise quickly, but it always crashes harder. The whispers had started. Some villagers had begun to suspect that something was wrong. Elders noticed the missing funds. Farmers complained about losing their lands. A storm was silently building in the background. The same villagers who once praised Gondo were now beginning to question him. His mask was slowly cracking, and truth was peeking through the holes. Still, Gondo remained blind to the signs. He thought he was untouchable, that no one could bring him down. He believed his lies were stronger than the truth, but fate had other plans. Karma was watching, patiently waiting for the perfect time to strike. Gondo didn't know that his downfall had already begun. The pain he caused, the lies he spread, the money he stole, it would all come back to him, stronger and louder. The village he thought he controlled was slowly waking up, and soon, the same people who once clapped for him would be the ones to drag him down. Because no matter how high evil climbs, it always falls harder. Gondo's days of power were numbered. The seeds of justice were already growing, and when they bloom, they would crush every wicked deed he ever planted. It was a day Sena would never forget, a day when her life was shattered even more than before. Gondo, full of evil and jealousy, decided it was time to completely get rid of her. He knew Sena's strength, her quiet dignity, and the love some villagers still showed her, and that made him afraid. He wanted to make her suffer even more, to crush the last piece of light left in her. So, he came up with a wicked plan, one that would ruin her name forever. One evening, Gondo stood in the middle of their compound, shouting and pretending to be furious. He held up a small sack of missing money from the village fund and pointed straight at Sena. "This girl is a thief!" he screamed, drawing the attention of neighbors and passers-by. He accused Sena of stealing the money he had secretly hidden himself. The villagers gathered quickly, shocked and confused. Rua, blinded by her love for Gondo and afraid to challenge him, stood silently. Not once did she defend her own daughter. Sena, shaking with fear and confusion, tried to explain. Tears streamed down her face as she said, "I didn't take anything. I swear on my father's grave." But no one listened. Gondo was respected in the village council. His voice sounded like truth to many. He weaved his lies so well that even those who once believed in Sena started to doubt her. Zuba laughed loudly and added fuel to the fire, mocking Sena in front of everyone. "Even with your innocent face, you're nothing but a thief," she spat. The humiliation was unbearable. Some villagers insulted her. Others threw stones at her. A few just turned their backs and walked away. No one came to protect her. No one saw her pain. Her mother, Rua, stood frozen, her eyes filled with guilt, but her lips sealed in silence. Gondo's plan worked perfectly. Sena was disgraced, heartbroken, and helpless. By nightfall, Gondo ordered her to leave the house immediately. He shouted, "You have no place here, thief! Go before I call the guards." With just a small bundle of her clothes, Sena walked away from the only home she had ever known. Her feet were bare, her heart heavy, and her soul shattered. She wandered aimlessly into the darkness, not knowing where to go or who to trust. Every step she took felt like a punishment. Every tear that fell whispered the same question, "Why me?" After walking for days without food, shelter, or direction, she finally reached a distant village called Malira. It was smaller, quieter, and unfamiliar. She sat under a tree near the edge of the village, tired and broken, hoping just to rest for a while. Some villagers saw her and wondered who this poor girl was, with dust on her feet and sadness in her eyes. Little did Sena know, this new village would be the beginning of something greater. Though she had been falsely accused and wrongfully banished, her journey was far from over. Life had pushed her down, but destiny was still watching. The same girl who was thrown out like a thief was about to rise like a star. And soon, those who laughed at her downfall would witness her rise with open mouths and heavy regret. But for now, she was just a lost girl in a strange land, trying to survive. Yet even in that moment of hopelessness, something deep inside her refused to die. Her spirit, her goodness, her strength, and that would be the very thing that life would use to write her comeback story. In the quiet village of Malira, life took a new turn for Sena. Though she arrived broken and lost, fate had not completely abandoned her. One morning, while sitting by the roadside with tired eyes and a hungry stomach, an elderly woman named Mama Ifoto noticed her. Mama Ifoto was a kind widow, known in the village for her generous heart and warm smile. She saw something in Sena that others had ignored. Pain, yes, but also strength. Without hesitation, she took Sena into her small home and gave her a place to sleep and warm food to eat. Mama Ifoto didn't ask many questions at first. She simply cared for Sena like a daughter, letting her heal slowly. As days passed, Sena began to open up. She shared her painful story, and Mama Ifoto listened with teary eyes. "Child," she said softly one evening, "life may beat you, but never let it defeat you." Mama Ifoto had her own small business. She made and sold shea butter, herbal oils, and natural cosmetics using ancient recipes passed down through generations. Sena, curious and eager to learn, began helping her. She watched how Mama Ifoto carefully picked herbs, mixed oils, and poured love into every product. With time, Sena became skilled at the craft. Her hands, once used to clean floors and carry burdens, now created beautiful jars of healing balm and scented shea butter. Customers started noticing the change. The products became more refined, the packaging better, the scents richer. Mama Ifoto smiled proudly as Sena began suggesting new ideas, mixing herbs in creative ways and giving the products unique names. Slowly, they expanded from selling at the village market to receiving special orders from nearby towns. One day, Mama Ifoto gave Sena a pouch of coins and said, "Use this to start something of your own. You have wings now, child. Fly." With tears in her eyes and determination in her heart, Sena started her own small stall in the Malira marketplace. She named her brand Sena Naturals and began selling her products with a soft voice and a big smile. Business grew faster than anyone expected. People loved the natural beauty of her products, but more than that, they admired her story, her resilience, her spirit. Travelers began coming from distant villages just to buy from the young girl with magic in her hands. She expanded her stall into a shop, then 2 shops, then 3. Within a few years, Sena became known as the beauty queen of Malira. She started training other village girls, giving them skills, confidence, and jobs. Sena's life, once full of beatings and insults, was now filled with praise, success, and admiration. She began attending village meetings, speaking to young women about self-worth, strength, and the power of never giving up. Even the elders looked at her with pride, saying, "This girl has the spirit of a lioness." Sena didn't forget Mama Ifoto. She built her a bigger house, filled it with love, and cared for her like a true mother. And she didn't forget her pain either. It became her power. Every scar she carried turned into a lesson. Every tear she had shed turned into wisdom. From a girl once treated like a maid, Sena had risen to become a respected business queen. The village that once knew her as a wandering girl now celebrated her as an icon of hope. She had proved that no matter how cruel life becomes, with kindness, hard work, and courage, anyone can rise. Her story wasn't just about pain, it was about rising from it and shining even brighter. Back in the village of Kuyani, Gondo continued to live like a king. He walked around with pride, acting like he was untouchable. He still sat on the village council, making decisions, pretending to care for the people while secretly stealing from them. He had fooled so many for so long that even the truth seemed like a lie to those who once trusted him. But no matter how high a bird flies, one day it must come down. And Gondo's day came in the most unexpected way. One morning, a young man from the village, who worked closely with the council, found something strange in the financial records. The numbers didn't add up. Funds meant for building wells, supporting farmers, and helping widows had disappeared. Word began to spread quickly. The villagers who had once praised Gondo started whispering behind his back. Questions were raised, and eyes turned toward him with doubt. Soon, a full investigation was launched. Village elders and leaders from nearby towns were called in to check the records. Hidden documents, fake signatures, and stolen land deals were all uncovered. People were shocked. The man they trusted the most had betrayed them all. Gondo's face lost its pride as the truth poured out like rain. When the villagers gathered for the public meeting, the air was thick with anger. Gondo stood before them, sweating and stammering, trying to deny everything, but it was too late. The evidence was clear. The same villagers who once bowed before him now shouted at him, "Thief! Liar! Betrayer!" Some even threw sand at his feet, a sign of deep disgrace in Kuyani. The village chief stood up and made the final decision. Gondo was stripped of his position, arrested, and sent to face trial in the regional court. The people clapped, not in celebration, but in relief. Justice had finally arrived. The same man who beat an innocent girl, stole from the people, and wore a mask of respect, was now a criminal in chains. His downfall didn't stop there. With Gondo gone, Rua and Zuba were left in shame and poverty. No one wanted to associate with them anymore. People refused to buy from them, talk to them, or even greet them. The friends they once had vanished like smoke. Rua, who once ignored her daughter's pain to please her husband, now sat in her small compound, broken and bitter. Zuba, who once mocked Sena and laughed at her suffering, now begged for food in the same market where she once strutted with pride. Their house, once full of noise and pride, turned silent and empty. The woman who turned her back on her own blood now faced the harsh consequences of her silence. And the girl they had thrown away like a rag, she was now a shining star in another village, respected and loved. People from Kuyani would often whisper among themselves, if only Rua had stood by her daughter, if only Gondo had feared karma, if only Zuba had been kind. But it was too late for regrets. The village had learned a hard lesson. Evil may rise for a while, but it never lasts. The fall of Gondo was a reminder that no wickedness stays hidden forever. Truth always comes out. Justice always finds its way. And while Gondo sat in a dark prison cell, the same belt he used to beat Sena now hung as evidence of his cruelty. Life had truly turned the tables. The one who caused so much pain was now the one begging for mercy. Years had passed since Sena had left Kuyani in shame and tears. But time has a way of revealing true strength, and life had turned in her favor. The young girl who was once beaten, insulted, and thrown away had now become a shining light in the land. Her name echoed far and wide as the successful founder of a booming shea butter and herbal cosmetics business. People spoke of her story in marketplaces, gatherings, and even in other villages. But one day, something happened that no one in Kuyani expected. Sena returned. She came back, not as the scared, broken girl they had thrown out, but as a powerful, confident woman. Dressed in graceful clothes and walking with pride, Sena stepped into the village with her head held high. Behind her followed workers, carts full of goods, and guards sent by wealthy merchants who now partnered with her. The moment she entered, whispers ran through the air like wildfire. "Is that Sena? The girl Gondo banished. She looks like a queen." Children who had never seen her before ran to peek at the woman their mothers had talked about. Elders stared with wide eyes, struggling to believe that this was the same girl once forced to sleep on the cold floor and clean muddy shoes. The same girl who was mocked by Zuba and ignored by her own mother. People came forward, bowing their heads in respect. The same mouths that once insulted her now sang her praises. The same hands that once pointed fingers now clapped in admiration. Even the village chief stepped forward to welcome her personally. "You left this place in pain, child," he said, "but you've returned as a flower in full bloom." Sena remained humble, greeting everyone with a warm smile. She walked through the village streets where she once carried heavy water pots. Only now she was followed by admirers. Some women cried as they apologized for believing Gondo's lies. Men shook their heads in shame, remembering how they had doubted her. But Sena carried no bitterness. She said, "The same fire that tried to burn me made me shine brighter." She went to the same spot where she used to cry alone and sat under the old baobab tree. Children gathered around her, and she began to share her story, not to boast, but to inspire. She told them how kindness, patience, and hard work can change any life. How pain is not the end of the story, but sometimes the beginning of a greater one. She opened a small training center in Kuyani to teach young girls skills in cosmetics, business, and self-confidence. She offered jobs to widows and single mothers. She donated to rebuild the community school that Gondo's greed had left in ruins. Her return didn't just bring pride, it brought healing. Even Rua heard of her return. The once proud woman, now weak and poor, came quietly to see her daughter. She stood at a distance, unsure if she even deserved a word from Sena. But Sena saw her, walked toward her, and hugged her tightly. "I carried a lot of pain," she said softly, "but I've left it behind." The entire village watched in silence. That moment touched every heart. A girl who had every reason to hate had chosen forgiveness instead. And that made her not just a successful woman, but a great one. From that day, people in Kuyani told their children, "Never mock the weak, Never mistreat the humble. You never know which rose you're stepping on, because one day, that rose might bloom again, and it will bloom brighter than ever. Sena stood tall, her heart filled with peace and grace. She had returned to Kuyani as a symbol of victory, but the pain of her past still echoed softly in her memory. Her mother, Rua, once blind to her suffering, stood before her now with tears in her eyes and shame in her heart. Sena looked at her, not with anger, but with quiet strength. She chose to forgive her mother, not because she had forgotten the pain, but because her heart was too full of growth to carry hatred. But when Gondo appeared, broken and covered in dust, begging on the side of the road, Sena did not even glance his way. The man who once raised his belt to her, who screamed at her like she was nothing, now stretched his hands out, trembling, begging for food and mercy. His eyes were hollow, his clothes torn, his pride crushed under the same weight he once placed on Sena's shoulders. People passed him without pity. The same villagers who once feared him now spat on the ground near him. He had become the very thing he had feared, powerless and forgotten. He saw Sena from a distance and crawled toward her, calling her name, crying like a helpless child. But Sena walked past him without a word, not out of revenge, but because he no longer had any power over her. His cries echoed behind her, but she didn't stop. The same way he had once ignored her tears, life had now turned its back on him, and that was his true punishment, not from her, but from fate itself. Zuba, Gondo's proud and arrogant daughter, had also tasted life's bitter turn. The girl who once mocked Sena, who treated her like a slave, now lived in a tiny broken house with a drunk husband who beat her and spent all his money on palm wine. She had thought she was better than Sena, but now she lived in the same pain she once laughed at. Her beauty faded, her pride shattered, and her days filled with regret. Sometimes she would see Sena's face in the market posters, her business glowing with success, and every time she saw her, her heart sank with guilt and jealousy. But it was too late. Life had turned its wheel. Sena never celebrated their downfall. She focused on her mission, to help others rise, not fall. But deep inside, everyone in Kuyani saw the lesson clearly. The very people who tried to destroy her were now destroyed by their own wickedness. The village elders would often sit under the trees and say, "When you beat an innocent child, life will beat you harder. What you give out always finds its way back to you." Sena's story spread to other villages. She was invited to speak in gatherings, schools, and councils. Her words healed wounds, and her journey inspired thousands. She became more than a businesswoman. She became a voice of hope, a light for the broken, and a reminder that destiny always rewards those who keep their hearts pure, even in pain. And as the sun set over the village of Kuyani, one thing became very clear. Sena's scars had turned into her strength, and her pain had become her power. Life may have tried to crush her, but in the end, she rose higher than anyone ever imagined, and those who once tried to silence her could now only watch from the shadows of their own regret, because truly, when you beat the innocent, life will beat you harder. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that no pain lasts forever, and no injustice goes unpunished, then let it be a lesson we carry in our hearts. Sena's journey is not just a tale, it is the voice of every silent tear, every scar hidden behind a smile, and every soul that has suffered in silence yet still chooses kindness over bitterness. How many girls like Sena are still crying behind closed doors, unheard, unloved, and unseen? How many hearts are broken by those who are supposed to protect them? But remember this, life sees everything, and even when no one stands for you, destiny will rise for you, just like it did for Sena. So if this story moved you, if it made your heart ache or gave you hope, please don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, share it with someone who needs strength, and let it reach every hidden heart still living in pain. You never know, you might just help someone believe again. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel so we can continue bringing you stories that inspire, heal, and remind us all that no matter how dark the night is, the morning will always come. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for watching, thank you for believing, and thank you for being part of this journey. Let's keep spreading hope, love, and truth, one story at a time.